I know that God did not give us this just haphazardly. He chose the men to write it down. He inspired the men to write it down. They wrote down what he said to. And I do believe from the bottom of my heart, back when King James brought all these people together, God's hand was in it to put together what we have today. And I believe it is what we need, and it means what it says. And he says you might attain if you get to this point. So again, the opposite is true. And this is where I think the church has failed. We think we got it made. We need to be careful. We need to be wary. We need to strive. We need to persevere. We need to endure. We need to do all these things to make sure that we make it through. Coming to church every Sunday and sitting on the pew. I know it's said so many times, and don't do it. It don't do it. There are houses full this morning of people sitting on pews. They got the flames lapping at their heels. They're on their way to hell. But they're in church. How can that be? Because they haven't got here. They haven't got here. And I'm going to throw it in. And I believe they haven't got here because for a long, long time, the church hasn't been teaching this the way it's written. That's been the problem. But what he said is, if by any means I might attain unto the resurrection of the dead. Not as though I had already attained. If anybody should have already attained, it should have been Paul. We all know about Paul, how God called him, how God used him, revealed things to him he had never revealed to anybody else, chose him to be the apostle to the Gentiles and set up all these churches. If anybody had a right to think they made it, he had a right to think he made it. But he said, not as though I had already attained, either were already perfect, but I follow after, that I may apprehend that for which also I am apprehended for Christ. Brethren, I count not myself to have apprehended. At this point in Paul's ministry, at this point in Paul's life, at this point in Paul's service to Christ, he says, I count not myself to have already apprehended. If he couldn't, we can't. We've got to get to this point, and every day of our lives, we've got to make an effort to keep moving up, and to keep moving closer, and to keep moving on, and to keep following his word, and to keep getting to know him better, and to keep doing these things. You can't just relax. You can't let down. You can't just think you're going to just breeze on in and drift on in, because it ain't going to happen. And I know a lot of people will disagree with me. There may be some sitting here that may disagree with me. I believe there are people that have been saved, that have been going to church, that have been putting in their money, that have been faithful, that have worked in the church, and they've done this for 60, 70, 80 years. I believe there's some that ain't going to make it, because they're counting on that to get them in. And that won't get them in.
That's right.
There's only one thing that'll get you in. That's that righteousness that comes through Christ that I read about, that Paul said you get when you become this way. When you become this kind of person, that's when you get that righteousness. He says, I count not myself to have apprehended, but this one thing I do, forgetting those things which are behind, and reaching forth unto those things which are before. Listen, this is the main thing that God was showing me. This one thing I do. We need to make this determination. Again, we talked about this in Sunday school. It's a decision. It's a choice. You need to decide. You need to determine. This is what you're going to do. This is what Paul determined he was going to do. This one thing I do. Forgetting those things which are behind. That's where it's got to start. You got to forget about everything else that might have been, could have been, should have been, would have been, wasn't been, did been, whatever it was. You got to forget about everything else. What I was told growing up, the way my church did it, that pastor that I really admired, the way he said it. We got to forget about all these things. We got to leave it all behind. I know it's hard. You can get so confused in your mind sometimes. And I know what I'm talking about, because I was raised believing certain things. I was raised told certain things, and I would have fought you over those things, that those things were true, until God revealed the truth to me, until I was willing to listen, until I was willing to see, until I was willing to leave those things behind and move into the truth I couldn't go anywhere. I couldn't grow. I couldn't advance. I couldn't get to know Christ. We've been using this example lately here. Well, I couldn't see the face of God. I couldn't come into His presence. But the more I do that, laying beside my preconceived ideas, what the Baptists believe, what my preacher believes, the more I lay that aside and listen to God, the more of His face gets revealed to me, and the more I can know Him. But we got to be willing to do that. We got to be like Paul and say, this one thing I do. This is what I'm going to do. I'm going to lay it all aside. And I'm going to tell you this, if you got to do that, if you got to go to God and say, God, I realize I'm not sure. I realize there's a lot of things I don't understand. I realize I may not know what I think I know. I'm going to lay it down, and I want you to teach me. If you got to teach me from scratch, then teach me from scratch. If you got to take me from square one, take me from square one. But all I want to know is what you want me to know. And if you do that, God will. He will teach you. He will show you. He will reveal things to you. He will move you in directions you never thought possible. I'm telling you, He will show you things you never even thought of. You'll see things in a whole different light. You'll read this Word and things will begin to pop out of it that you never saw before. But you've got to be willing to be taught. You've got to be willing to listen. You've got to be willing to lay down whatever you may have thought or been taught. Maybe some of us right, but maybe you ain't sure. That's what you tell God. God, I ain't sure. You tell me. You show me. You teach me. You know the Bible says, I will send you the Comforter who will teach you all things. But if you're that kid that sits in the back of the class and sleeps, they don't learn anything when the teacher's teaching. You got to be able to hear and pay attention and listen and be willing to take it in and be willing to apply it. The problem with a lot of the church is we're all them kids that sit in the back of the class and sleep when the teacher is teaching. We don't want to hear it. When you were in school, did you ever have a substitute that would come in and take the place of your teacher? And a lot of these substitutes don't specialize in one area. You know, their degree may be in art, and they're teaching biology. And it's pretty obvious to the class they have no idea what they're talking about. We got a lot of them in pulpits. And that's what people are learning. And that's what people are receiving. But when the test comes, those things the art teacher told you aren't on the test. So what the art teacher told you ain't going to do any good. You're going to fail the test. You better go to the teacher and learn what you need to know. Who is that Comforter that Christ said He would send, who would teach you all things. He said, account not myself to have apprehended, but this one thing I do, forgetting those things which are behind, and reach forth unto those things which are before. I've been telling you, you probably already know, you don't need me to tell you. But God has things in store for us. But we got to reach for them. Leave this here and go for that God has for us. We need to begin to reach for the things that are ahead. We need to reach for the things that God has placed out there. We need to make an effort to go. And if you are listening when I'm reading this, all these things that Paul is saying, the words that he uses are all action verbs. They require you to do something. They require some effort from you to do something. He's going to forget the things that are behind. He's going to press. He's going to reach. He's going to make effort. He's the one that's doing it. And that's what we have to do. And as we already said, it's a choice. It's up to you. You can decide. It's a decision you make. You make that determination. Just like Paul made that determination. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to lay everything I thought I knew down. I'm going to ask God to teach me. I'm going to ask God to show me. And I'm going to begin to reach for the apple on the highest limb. There's some good fruit up there. And we can get to it if we're willing to put forth the effort, if we're willing to really read. There are things yet that God has not revealed that God is willing to reveal if we can get to the higher limbs. But in order to get to the higher limbs, we got to do these things. We got to lay down everything else and reach for those things that God has out there for us. Reach for those things that will benefit us, that will help us, that will grow us, that will increase us. Those are the things that God wants us to have. But it all starts with a very simple thing. Get to know Him. Be honest with Him. Be yourself with Him. Be open with Him. For lack of a better way to put it, bare your soul to Him. And then move on and do these things. He said, forgetting the things which are behind and reaching forth unto those things which are before. I press toward the mark for the prize of the high calling of God in Christ Jesus. We got to lay them down. Then we got to begin to reach. We got to press. We got to push. We got to struggle. We got to fight for the high calling. We have a high calling. We have yet to attain to that. We have not got to that thing that we have been called to yet. We have a high calling, and we need to press forward to reach that high calling. We have been called to be the feet, to be the hands, to be the mouth, to be the ears, to be the eyes of Christ on the earth. That is a high calling, and we need to meet that calling. But we ain't never going to do it if we think we know stuff. We ain't never going to do it if we adhere to all the old stuff, if we stay in the old way, if we just do everything like we've always done it, the same old, over and over and over and over. Well, if you got any sense, you got to realize it ain't accomplishing anything. Look where we are. Come on. It ain't working. It's time to do it the right way now. We gave that plenty of time to work. We gave it a chance. We gave it a try. We did it the church way. We did it the denominational way. We did it preacher so-and-so's way. And it didn't work. Now let's do it God's way. Amen. Let's attain under that high calling. Let's be what we're supposed to be. Let's do what we're supposed to do. He said, this one thing I do, forgetting those things which are behind. Reach forth to those things which are before. There's something out there. I've said it over and over and over in this place. There's something out there for us. And we need to reach for it. We need to grasp for it. We need to make every effort to get to it. It is there. The problem is, we're not getting to it. We need to reach for it. Make an effort. I'm going to ask you something. Don't answer me, but be honest with yourself. When you leave this church house, how much of the time this week are your prayers and your thoughts and your concerns on what this church is supposed to be? Come on. You can't just come in here and be concerned for an hour and expect anything to happen. If you're going to be the church of Jesus Christ, it's got to be all day, every day. I'm not telling you, go home and get in your closet and pray all week. That's not, I know you can't. You got things you got to do. But it's just like I was telling you. You can do it while you're working. You can do it while you're cleaning. You can do it while you're doing other things. But if it's not on your mind, if it's not a priority, if it's not important, if you don't have a burden for it, then you're not in the right place. If we're ever going to attain, if we're ever going to reach those things out there that God has for this church, for what we're supposed to be and what we're supposed to do and what we're supposed to accomplish, it's got to become something that we have a burden over. If we don't have a burden for it, it ain't going to happen. I press toward the mark for the prize of the high calling. We have got to make the effort. We have got to decide. We've got to make that determination. We've got to be like Paul and say, this thing I'm going to do. I'm going to push. And I'm going to push. And I ain't going to quit pushing. And I ain't going to quit reaching. And how do you do that? On your knees is how you do a lot of it. And this came up in Sunday school. Well, I did that and God didn't answer, so he must not want. Keep pushing. Keep pushing. Keep pushing. Keep reaching. Until God says, shut up and go away. Do it. He'll either answer or he'll tell you no. But until that time, keep doing it. Reach for it, push for it, press for it. We can get there. But we've got to do it as a church. I know I preached this kind of stuff before, but we don't seem to be getting it. It has to be as a church. Not just one of us can try to be doing all the pushing and the reaching and drag everybody else along. It won't work. It takes all of us. You know how much strength it's going to take to reach that goal? The exact amount of strength that this church has when it works as one. When it works in unity, with the same purpose, with the same goal, with the same vision, with the same drive. That's how much it takes, and that's the only way we're going to get there. I'm going to jump ahead because this should come in, and I want you to hear this. Verse 16 of that chapter. Nevertheless, whereunto we have already attained, let us walk by the same rule, let us mind the same thing. We have to be in the same mind. We have to walk in the same path. We have to mind the same things in order for anything to get accomplished. He said, I press toward the mark of the prize of the high calling of God in Christ Jesus. Let us therefore, as many as be perfect. Well, the Bible says there's none perfect, no, not one. This word perfect, you go back and look at the original meaning, it means full grown or mature. That's another problem in the church. There's not a lot of mature Christians. Might be a lot that are physically in age mature, but spiritually not mature. But listen to what he said. Let us therefore, as many as be perfect or mature, be thus minded. We have to have that same mind. This has to be our goal. We have to be like Paul. We have to say, this is what we're going to do. We're going to reach out there and get what God has for us. We're going to press so that we can fulfill that high calling. We have to have the same mind. Let us therefore, as many as be perfect, be thus minded. And if in anything ye be otherwise minded, God shall reveal even this unto you. We all have to have that same mind, that same goal, that same purpose, all pressing, all pushing, all reaching in the same direction. And if any be otherwise minded, God will reveal it to you if you're willing to hear it, if you're willing to learn, if you're willing to listen. And that comes right back to revealing yourself to God and opening yourself to God and letting God speak and letting God teach and letting God guide and letting God direct and letting God reveal things to you that you need to stop and you need to lay down or you need to start or you need to pick up or whatever it is. Paul said that we have to all have this same mind, reach for the same thing, press for the same thing, have the same vision, have the same direction. And if you have anything else in your mind, God will reveal this to you. Do you ever go to God and just ask him, show me where I'm wrong. Show me what I'm doing wrong. Show me what I need to change. That's what we need to do. And it may not be intentional. And you might not think it's anything bad. And it might not be anything bad in itself. But it may not be the vision. It may not be the goal that God has in mind for you or for this church. It might be a good goal. It might be a good vision. It might be a good thing to attain unto. But if that's not the purpose God has for you, then it's not going to work. You've got to walk in the path he set for you. And if you're not in that path, he will show you if you will ask and if you will listen. Let us therefore, as many as be perfect, or mature, or full grown, be the same minded, have the same vision, all that stuff I said. And if anything ye be otherwise minded, God shall reveal even this unto you. I'm going to back up and just try to put this together, and I think I'll be done. But Paul started out saying, you know, if anybody's got anything to brag about, it's me. And there's some of us. We've worked in the church. We've done this in the church. We've done that in the church. We've been in the church so long. We've accomplished this, and we've accomplished that. We've done all kinds of things, and we always pay our 10%, and we always are there, and we always do this, and whatever else. And like Paul was saying, if anybody's got anything to brag about, I do. Some of us do in the flesh. Because we've given ourselves to the care of the church and the work of the church and all this kind of stuff, and we've done all that. And But if that's what we're counting on, like Paul said, to get us in, it's not going to work. If that's what I'm counting on, if that's what I'm relying on, then it becomes that dung that he was talking about. But he said, here's what you got to do. You got to understand that we that worship God, that we that serve God, must do it in spirit. We do it from the heart. It's got to be from the core. It's got to be me. I've got to give myself to God. I've got to open up. I've got to bear myself to him. I've got to give him everything that I am. And if I will do that, then I can begin to get to know him. And when I begin to get to know him,